Concept Analysis of Fatigue by Javon Houston. Aims of concept analysis. According to Walker and Avant, concept analyses are useful when defining ambiguous concepts and are also helpful when clarifying vague concepts, which are often found to be prevalent in nursing. This concept analysis aims to identify specific attributes and to distinguish variances between its colloquial and nursing language. The basis of analyzing the concept of fatigue is to theoretically define its ambiguous meanings, opposed to less common defining terms. My goal in turn is to distinctively recognize correlations and disassociations of the concept of fatigue. Why fatigue? This concept, like many others, is used interchangeably in medicine with no clear delineation from other terms. Fatigue is important when it's a chief complaint of the patient or an observable portion of data when planning care. Fatigue can be both verbally and visually expressed. It is a common sign and symptom that leads to multiple underlying disease processes, extending from simple to severe. What is fatigue? The word fatigue comes from the Latin word fatigere, which means to tire. According to Merriam-Webster, fatigue is defined as weariness or exhaustion from labor, exertion, or stress, the temporary loss of power to respond that is induced in a sensory receptor or motor end organ by continuous stimulation, to use up all the physical energy of, a complete depletion of energy or strength, and a very hard or unpleasant work. According to the Britannica Encyclopedia, fatigue is defined as a specific form of human inadequacy in which the individual experiences an aversion to exertion and feels unable to carry on. Theoretical definitions. Two theoretical definitions were found. The first one is the theory of fatigue of metals by Egon Orowan. And this specific theory suggests that fatigue occurs when materials are subjected to repeated loading and unloading. This particular theory depicts a minimal crack at a point of local high stress, which grows larger as the stress continues. Then it finally weakens and distorts the particular space. Its progressive structural damage is attributed to maximum stress values being significantly higher than other stress materials. The next theoretical definition is Dorothea Orum's self-care model. This theory focuses on making patients self-reliant on their care in order to promote health. One of the three related parts of the theory includes self-care requisites. The requisites identified include the maintenance of sufficient intake of air, food, and water, provision of care associated with the elimination process, a balance between activities and rest, as well as between solitude and social interaction, the prevention of hazards to human life and well-being, the promotion of human functioning. By ensuring self-care and its requisites, the experience of fatigue can be decreased and health can be promoted. Defining attributes. The defining attributes of the concept analysis of fatigue include the state of reduced sensory and motor stimulation, the unpleasant feeling of depletion, and the attribute of inadequacy. The fifth step in the concept analysis process is to construct a model case. An example of a model case for the concept analysis of fatigue includes Kayla M. is a 15-year-old African-American female who reported to the emergency clinic with a fever for 3 days, tiredness, and neck stiffness. While assessing the patient and updating her medical record, Kayla states that she is a freshman at the local high school and has recently begun a new relationship. When asked to explain how she had been feeling for the past couple of days, Kayla states, "Well, I was fine on Monday and Tuesday, but Wednesday I woke up with a temperature of 101.5 and neck stiffness. I was unable to move my head from side to side, which was bizarre, and to go along with that, I was feeling tired. Tired to the point where I couldn't walk 5 steps to the bathroom without feeling overexerted. I couldn't eat dinner with my family or do my homework either." After the objective and subjective data was given and recorded and taken, a couple minutes had passed by and the nurse informed Kayla that she had mononucleosis. This disease was passed through saliva. The nurse went on to educate her that this had no specific treatment, but only the treatment of its symptoms, such as the fever and the fatigue with rest. The sixth step of the concept analysis involves constructing borderline, relative, and contrary cases. According to Walker and Avant, a borderline case contains most of the defining attributes, but not all of them. They also consider a related case to be instances of concepts that are related to the concept being studied but do not contain all of the defining attributes. Additionally, a contrary case is a clear delineation and example of what the concept is not. An example of the borderline case includes Kayla M. is a 15-year-old African-American female reported to the emergency clinic complaining of a fever for 3 days, tiredness, and also neck stiffness. While assessing the patient and updating her medical history, Kayla states that she's a freshman at the local high school and has recently begun a new relationship. When asked to explain how she had been feeling for the past couple of days, Kayla states, "Well, I was fine on Monday and Tuesday, but Wednesday I woke up with a temperature of 101.5 and neck stiffness. I wasn't able to move my head from side to side, which was bizarre. I just wasn't feeling like my usual upbeat self, but I still went to school." Clinical experiences told the nurse that the people with mono usually experience debilitating fatigue. She wondered why Kayla's response was different and raised a question. Kayla responded, "Huh? Sorry? What'd you say?" The practitioner repeated herself, pacing her words, and Kayla replied, "Well, I wasn't feeling normal, and it had been hard for me to concentrate lately." After the objective and subjective data was given and recorded, blood tests and cultures were taken. A couple of minutes had passed by, and the nurse informed Kayla that she had mono, a disease passed through saliva. The nurse went on to educate her that there wasn't any specific treatment, but that of only its symptoms, including rest for the fatigue and Tylenol for the fever. This example does not exemplify all the attributes of fatigue, but it still relates to fatigue. Although Kayla didn't verbally express the words fatigue, her behaviors of fatigue were noted. The lack of concentration cued the sign of fatigue, both verbally expressed and witnessed at the appointment. An example of a related case for the concept of fatigue includes Jan is a 43-year-old single mother of 3 boys ranging from ages 3 to 8. Being a mom for 8 years, she knows that often when one is sick, the whole house usually follows. Jan knew she was getting ill because of the malaise she had been experiencing for the past couple of days. This related case defines the concept of malaise. Malaise is considered a colloquial term used in medicine, often seen with fatigue. Both fatigue and malaise demonstrate similar ideas, but when studied closely, each possesses a difference in certain parts. Contrary case. An example of contrary case includes Jimbo is a 35-year-old male who comes to the clinic for a well checkup. Noted in his assessment is a heart rate of 55 beats per minute. Jimbo goes on to explain that he is an avid marathon runner and that 55 beats per minute is a normal heart rate for him. He tells the practitioner that along with running, he eats a strict diet that allows him to keep up with the demands of his twin toddlers. "They keep me going," he exclaimed. This defining attribute of fatigue is missing. It's a clear understanding of what fatigue is not and helps define the concept of health. The scenario may be associated with what should be fatigue felt by Jimbo, but the nature of his health has allowed him to overcome the feeling of fatigue. Closely related concepts. The concept of malaise and lethargy are closely related to the concept of fatigue. Merriam-Webster defines malaise as an indefinite feeling of debility or lack of health, often indicative of or accompanying the onset of illness. It's also defined as a vague sense of mental or moral ill-being. Although malaise may coincide with the feeling of fatigue, not all fatigue warrants illness. Also related but differs is the concept of lethargy. Lethargy, defined by Merriam-Webster, is an abnormal drowsiness or a state of being lazy, sluggish, or indifferent. In medicine, lethargy is consistent with drowsiness in which a patient may be aroused by stimulation, but ultimately falls back to the original state. Thus, drowsiness may manifest the same as fatigue. Differences in the defining terms still exist. In summary, some concepts of fatigue, malaise, and lethargy coexist, the most obvious attribute being the feeling of unpleasant tiredness. As mentioned, all concepts include a negative feeling of exhaustion that can be attributed to illness at times or not associated at all. The concept of fatigue, malaise, and lethargy can be correlated in some instances, but do not always appear together or are synonymous in meaning. The 7th step in the concept analysis process is the identification of antecedents and consequences. An antecedent event are events that must occur prior to the occurrence of the concept, and consequences are events that happen as a result of the concept. Examples of antecedents include alcohol, drugs, stress, poor diet, injury, illness, depression, anxiety, and grief. Consequences include a higher risk of accident, decreased productivity, illness, depression, lack of motivation, reduced reaction time, increased errors in judgment, reduced attention and vigilance, and reduced communication. The final step in the concept analysis process is to define empirical reference. Empirical references are classes or categories of actual phenomena that, by their existence or presence, demonstrate the occurrence of the concept itself. Examples are irritability, loss of appetite, tiredness, headaches, depression, slowed reflexes, muscle weakness, and poor concentration. Research. Fatigue of no etiology for a period of time can be diagnosed as chronic fatigue syndrome, CFS, or myalgic encephalomyelitis. Although this issue is nothing new to medicine and dates back over years ago, information on treatment still remains scarce. Nancy Klimas is the director of the Institute of Neuroimmune Medicine at Nova Southeastern University. She describes CFS by idiopathic, severe, long-lasting fatigue. Despite information regarding this issue being inadequate, Dr. Klimas and her team are conducting research in the probable causes of chronic fatigue, focusing on post-infective fatigue in children, fibromyalgia, and Gulf War illnesses, and gaining more knowledge about its effects.